Scott Brown here. You know when you have always done a job a certain way, and then one day someone comes along on your building site or on the internet and does it completely differently, and you think, what? I can't believe I didn't know that. That is so much better. And then it changes the way you work. Well, this video is a list of tips and techniques and tricks that I've picked up over 20 years of building. In today's exciting episode, I'll show you 10 carpentry tricks and tips so you don't have to wait 20 years. If you want to find the center of a board like this, rather than bothering with the calculator, bring the edge of your tape, so a whole number like 100, lines up with the edge, and then turn the tape until you get to another whole number, like 300. Now we know the halfway point between those two would be 200. Put a little dot there. That's the center. 70. This is 140. That trick is really useful if you're using imperial measurements, where you're using a lot of fractions, or if you're using metric measurements where it might be like 188 or something, and off the top of your head you don't know how to divide that in two. And that's the thing about carpentry. To be more efficient, you're always looking for little shortcuts that help you along the way. That actually reminds me of a bonus tip that most carpenters will know, but I used it then after I found the halfway point. It's this. If I have a little mark here, and I want a parallel line all the way across, just go like that. I'll show you a bit closer. I hold my pencil like that, and then I use my middle finger, I put it there, and then I move the point of the pencil until it gets to my mark, using my pointer and thumb, just go in and out like that, and then once I'm happy, then I kind of press my thumb down onto my middle finger. It creates like a little clamp, and then I just guide along. On to tip 2. Actually, before we get to 2, this is somewhat related to the last comment. What if you want a parallel line somewhere where your finger cannot reach? It's all about using your fingers to clamp the tape or pencil. My thumb and my pointer finger are together here like so, and then I allow the tape to slide down until it gets to the mark that I want, and then I make sure to pin the pencil against the end of my tape, and then I go like that. And the same can be done with a ruler. You can also use a knife. That's how people cut plasterboard really quickly. If they want to rip like a 300mm wide sheet of plasterboard, they'll use that technique. Should we go to tip 2 now? Pythagoras theorem. I'm going to keep it simple because I myself am not that good at maths. I call it the 3-4-5 trick. That is a quick way to find out if something is square. But what if you don't have a square for something as big as this? I hope I built this square because we're going to check right now. As a builder, I use this all the time, the 3-4-5 trick. 300, 400 over here, 400. Now, if this is square, from there to there should be 500. There you go, it's pretty much in the right place there. Oh look, it's pretty much 500. It's square. It's perfectly square. And when we're laying out a building, that's really handy because you can go 3 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters. And then you know you're getting it square over large distances, which means you're getting it more accurate. 3-4-5. Tip 3. So this method is good if you want to get a perfect sheet in a select area. It doesn't matter so much with plasterboard because you can fill the gaps, but let's say this was plywood though. You would want to get it pretty perfect. So here's a method that you can use. This is plumb and this is level. Not in any particular place, it's just approximately in the middle. And what we do is we get measurements. So from the bottom to the horizontal line is 385, and it should be the same over here. Yep. So I write that on my little picture here, and then I just keep getting measurements. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a little map, and then I'll take this map to a sheet of plasterboard and transfer it all over onto that. Now rather than a horizontal and vertical line, we're just working with 2 lines, and all that matters, the only thing that matters, is that they are square to each other. So that's my grid that I taped up onto the wall there. I only used tape because you couldn't draw on every part of the frame. Now all I have to do is get all these measurements onto here. This technique is really handy when you're doing plywood interior lining, and it has to be perfect, especially when you're doing negative detail. Even if the line is squiggly, you can follow it. Oh yeah! The cross trick. I'm calling it the cross trick. See this return mitre here? Wait, can you see it? This return mitre here. I'll show you how I did that. Rather than having the timber finish on a funny cut like that, you cut this little piece and you put it there. You treat it like a corner. Let's do it simply on like a straight piece of wood. Right, so if you've got an external wall like this, imagine that's a wall, and that goes there like that, you've got your external mitre. That's how it would usually be. Now all you need to do is make it so one board is finishing in the middle of the wall like that. And obviously I can't move that along until I cut here. So all you do is go to the short point of your mitre and cut a square line there. So short point of the mitre, square across there. And there we go. And now you can't see the end grain. And that little trick will work no matter how complex your timber trim is. Next tip. The next tip, tip number 5, is build a door block to help you with a door. There's many ways to build a door holder, and this one is a very simple way. That's why I like it. You can just throw it together with a couple of blocks on a building site. So you cut 3 blocks, 1 big block and then 2 smaller blocks. Now this little gap here needs to be big enough for your door, and probably a little bit bigger than your door actually. If a typical door is 35mm here in New Zealand, what have I done? I've done 41 here, so maybe 5mm bigger than a typical door. When you drop your door in here, you've got the sloped area and a gap for a wedge. I like to use a little bit of rubber there to protect the door, and then you put your wedge in and that tightens it. And then you're free to router in your hinges, chisel in your hinges. Little jigs and things like that make carpentry a lot easier. Build a door block. Do you want to know why I have the best workshop in the world here? Hello. Hey doggy. Hello. The neighbor has puppies. And yes, it is very tempting.
Even though the light is dim, should she ever catch you far away?
Now it is very important to learn tips and tricks and techniques to help you do your job easier. Well, there's one way that will help you run your business easier, and that is to have a proper website. And why not use today's sponsor, Squarespace? Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where you can build your online presence and run your business. It's a great website building platform because it takes all the difficulty out of it. You don't need to know how to code. And they have thousands of templates to choose from, and those templates are professional, and one of them is bound to match the style of your business. And the cool thing is, once you've picked a template, then you can have invoices built into the website as well. So you can invoice your client straight from your website, and that invoice will match the look of your website. Now, if you are a professional and you want to reach as many people as possible, Squarespace have SEO tools built in, which will help your Google search results. People will find your business easier. And if you're anything like me, you just want to get on with building things, and you don't have time to sit there and sort out a website, Squarespace have introduced a new thing that they call Blueprint AI, where they use AI software to make building a website really quick. All you do is put a little bit of information about your business and it generates a website for you. And then you just tweak the finer details to get it just right. And then you get back to building. And if you're not convinced, don't worry, there's also a free trial, so you have nothing to lose. But make sure if you are gonna go ahead and do a proper website, use squarespace.com/Scott Brown Carpentry, and then you'll get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks, Squarespace. All right, tip number 6. This is an old piece of Remu. This is native timber in New Zealand, and my house is entirely built out of it. And I know that because when I tried to drill into it, it started smoking. See the smoke?
Yeah.
That's how hard the timber is. That is a common problem when you're working with harder woods than your typical pine or Douglas fir. So here is a hot tip. You get a bar of soap and you soap up your screw. Let's see how much easier it goes in. That felt easier. Obviously, another thing you can do is pre-drill it. And I tried to do that on my house on a particularly hard piece of native timber, and it didn't help. If I had known this tip to soap and or wax with beeswax your screw, it would have been a lot easier. Okay, if you're actually working as a carpenter and you do this next trick, you'll probably get in trouble with your boss. But I'm going to show you it anyway. Now sometimes when you're building you have to put a peg in the ground to hold boxing for concrete, for instance, temporary string lines, whatever it is. And say the ground's a bit hard, when you go to hit it in, if you go away from the center a bit, like this, you can, it's not going to split, is it? Sometimes you can split it. There we go, finally, a bit chipped off. Now to avoid that, you put a chamfer on your peg. Now the reason this will get you in trouble if you're working for another builder is because they'll see this as a waste of time. But I do it to illustrate a point. The point of putting a chamfer on anything, including a peg, that is less likely to chip. That's why you put a chamfer on the edge of your deck. That's why you put a chamfer on the edge of plywood. That's why you put the chamfer on the edge of a bench, is because when it's going to get knocked, as it inevitably does, it's less likely to chip the timber on that end grain. Timber wants to separate like that. The chamfer helps prevent that. But don't do it for pegs. It's not really worth it. Just make another peg. And for the record, I am saying peg, not pig. Us Kiwis don't like to use vowels correctly. Peg. Does that sound better? I used to do a lot of concrete work when I first started building. I was working on commercial jobs, would build big shopping malls and a lot of concrete. So you do a lot of boxing and you'd cut a lot of pegs. And after hitting the pegs over and over, and they've sometimes split, I came up with the idea to chamfer it. But of course, that is very pedantic, and my friend Josh, who is another builder and a good friend of mine, he gave me crap about it. And he told Jess about that, and Jess said, that epitomizes you perfectly. That's why things take so long, because you're putting chamfers on pegs. So now when I'm being a little bit too fussy on a job on our house, Jess will say, chamfer on a peg, as a little shortcut to remind me that I'm being too fussy. Next tip. Using a chalk line in the wind can be difficult. You stretch the line all the way out, and then you go and lift it and the wind grabs it, and you ping it, and then the line's not straight. My friend Chris Strider taught me the next trick. So here's a fun little trick. There's your little line. So let's do that all the way along. It works well on pine and Douglas fir, especially wet stuff. Oh. And all these little marks represent what we need to cut off. This one is already where it wants to be, pretty much. And this one is marked already. There we go, that's how we get a nice straight line in windy conditions. Let's say you're putting nogs in a framed floor, for example, or a deck or something like that. You've nailed a nog in and it's not sitting flush. And you want to get it sitting flush so everything's nice and flat. Well, there's a very quick way to do that. You put a screw in the piece of wood that is sitting too low, and then you hook your hammer on it, and you use the piece of wood that's sitting up to leverage the other one flush. You pop a nail in, fix it in place, and then you take the screw out, and it's all flush and level and looking beautiful. And if it doesn't work, if you pull the screw straight out, for example, just use a screw that has a more harsh thread so it really grips it. You can also use nails as well. It's a nice handy trick that I use all the time when I'm doing framing. number 10. Let's say you want to pop a nail up there and you're worried about hitting your fingers, especially when you're just getting started. Grab a folding ruler, use it like tongs. Pinch a nail. Man, so I've been building for like 20 years, so there's plenty more tips and tricks where that came from, but it was hard work trying to come up with the ones that I used in this video because they're second nature to me, and I don't think about the tips and tricks until I need them. But then once I started thinking about it and started going through my old videos, I actually came up with quite a lot, so let me know if you want to see a part 2 of this video. And if you have some tips and tricks that help you, or tricks that you use every day, and tips that maybe an old carpenter taught you, I would love to read about them in the comments below, so let me know. Alright, let's just do one more tip. This is not really a trick or a tip, but this is just a piece of advice. Use safety gear. I know you probably hear this all the time, especially from people who've been building for a while like me, but it's so important. And nowadays, there's really no reason not to. They're making cooler and cooler earmuffs, cool looking masks. They're kind of making safety gear like your tools, which is great because it makes you want to buy good ones and use them. Use safety glasses, for instance. That's super important. When I first started building, I actually did a year of boat building before I started my actual carpentry. And in that boat building year, I was 17 years old, so I was given all the good jobs, making cups of tea for everybody, sweeping up, and mixing epoxy. And back then, we'd just get a big tub, fill it with resin and epoxy, and just mix and mix and mix like this with a stick, like I was doing a big potion or something. No safety glasses, no nothing, and one day the resin flicked up out of the tub, hit my eyeball and burnt the retina. And I had to get rushed off to hospital, patch in my eye, they flushed it all out, put a patch on my eye for like 3 days. But I learned that in that first year, okay, wear safety glasses, especially when you're doing things like that. And if you've watched my videos for long enough, you've probably seen me not doing the right thing from time to time. But I try to remember safety equipment, and the videos actually help me because I know people are watching and people usually call me out, and that's a form of accountability, which is great. So tip 11, wear safety gear, and if you want to hear more about safety gear, I'll check my video over here where I talk about the safety gear that I use, and I'll see you in the next exciting episode.